Challengers is a movie that deceives you from its trailer, but also not really. In my opinion, Challengers is the most fun film by Luca Guadagnino, with an exciting score from Trent Reznor and Atticus Finch, and a story with interesting characters in a setting that allows for realistic sports fantasy. And this film is maybe not her best, but my favorite acting performance from Zendaya. I've heard from some people who view this movie negatively that it feels like nothing is really happening, and I think that's all based on the trailer, building this movie up to be the Zendaya threesome film, which is weird because it is, but it's not. I'll explain. Love triangle. One of the things I enjoy in this film is the love triangle dynamic and the shifts in power throughout the runtime. The story follows Art and Patrick, played by Mike Feist and Josh O'Connor, two young tennis players who are known as Fire and Ice, a tennis dynamic duo. A defining moment in both of their lives is when they meet Tashi Duncan, played by Zendaya, a young tennis phenom being hyped as the next young star to take over the sport and the world. Now for me, what makes this movie special is the dynamic between the three main leads and the connectivity between them being love for the sport that brought them together. When Tashi meets Art and Patrick, they start to introduce themselves, but she already knows who they are. She says, "You're Fire and Ice, right? Which one is which?" In my interpretation of the film, the game is on at this moment. Scenes like this make the structure of the film make more sense because it jumps back and forth in time from the final match between Art and Patrick and how they got here. But the match they are playing at the end is symbolic for the game they've all been a part of since they met. Tashi and the tennis ball theory. Tashi is the tennis ball in this metaphorical match. Obvious, right? But I want to take a detour to talk about dependency. The connection between a player and the ball used in whatever sport is interesting. Just as much as they determine where the ball goes, the ball determines their movements as well, both being dependent on the other. That's why Tashi says to Patrick that tennis is a relationship, because one player is dependent on the ball, and that's dependent on the opponent's swing and decision making. But once the serve is hit and the ball reaches the other side of the court, the roles of power and dependence switch, except for the ball. Its power is constant if the players continue the game. Tashi lives for tennis. As much as she would like to say there's more to life, my interpretation is that the sport gave her life. Her career-ending injury changed everything, and obviously the expectations of the world and how she wants to be seen plays a factor into her bitterness towards Art's disinterest in continuing his career in the present. But I honestly believe Tashi would trade the husband, the riches, the fame, even her daughter, to have those moments on the court again. That's why I think Tashi chooses to be the tennis ball in this dynamic, maybe subconsciously at first, but then purposefully pitting Art and Patrick against each other and heightening their emotions, because even though she isn't on the court in the final match, they are both dependent on her approval or attention, and knowing this, she chooses to give or take away interest in order for the best game possible to be played. Zendaya's performance in Challengers is great. Something that has to be acknowledged though is the obvious light skin washing of the Tashi Duncan character. I never really saw this myself, but after watching a video by Lani's Lens, a really great and informative creator on the platform, I do think it's worth pointing out. Tashi Duncan is a young black woman who is a tennis star at a young age, already given endorsements and looked at as the person that will change the generational history of her family. Though loving Zendaya's performance, I do think it would have been cool to have someone in the role who looks more like a Coco Gauff or Serena Williams, even a Naomi Osaka, if you kept the mixed race aspects in the film that have no real impact on the plot or Tashi's character, sadly. Seeing a darker skinned black woman in the Tashi role would have been really cool and would push against the desirability politics we still enforce today, but sadly that's not the reality we live in. Definitely check out Lani's Lens YouTube channel and her video Biracial is the New Black, link in the description. To speak on more specifics on Zendaya's performance as Tashi, she commands attention in every scene, regardless if she's playing Tashi in the past or the present. The best and most memorable and memeable thing about her performance is her facial expressions. Not only do they have a iconography to them now, but I love the subtle moments of analyzing that she has. The look in her eyes in these moments is almost predatory curiosity, especially in the infamous kissing scene. Misdirect, but still effective. Let's talk about the most milked scene in the trailer and why I think certain people were let down by this film. The scene when they all kiss and you think it's going to turn into a threesome until Tashi leaves both Art and Patrick and the audience wanting more, I guess. To me, it sucks that the trailer led so much with this particular scene, because though the vibe of this scene captures the entire film and probably was the best marketing strategy, I'd say the visual is slightly misleading. But this scene is extremely important to understand all three of our characters. When Tashi arrives at their hotel door, both Art and Patrick are shocked and excited, but the question in both of their heads is, who is she going to pick? So as all three of them are conversing, the game is on again. Certain verbal jabs are thrown here from both guys to direct Tashi's attention to themselves. At a certain point, Tashi says, "Alright, enough of the bullshit," and sits down on the bed, looks down at both of the guys, and says, "Come here." Art asks, "Which one?" As he finishes the last syllable, Patrick already is moving towards the bed with Art right behind him. If you pay attention to Tashi's face in this scene, she seems the most aroused by the control she possesses in this situation. And as all three of them kiss, she tries to move their heads closer to each other for them to engage independently. They instinctively pull away. Tashi sees this and smiles, then starts kissing them both, creating comfort again. When Tashi successfully gets Art and Patrick to make out, the look on her face is haunting because of how gleeful she seems. In her head, they would never do this without her influence, so seeing them kiss so passionately at first seems like ultimate control, but when she says okay to stop them and to bring them back to reality, I think Tashi realizes what many of us in the audience did as well. Art and Patrick love each other, maybe more than they even know. And her reason to stop them and to leave is to regain the control that was almost lost in this moment. I think part of why I even believe this is because the way that it's shot. When they first start making out, it shows that shot of Tashi with the camera looking downward at her while she's smiling, looking at them. But when the camera changes to just looking at Art and Patrick kissing, it's her POV. And I think that the audience is supposed to be Tashi in that moment, understanding the gravity of this moment more than Art and Patrick do. Churros. Before seeing Challengers for the first time, I wondered if this movie was just a conduit for Zendaya to showcase something different acting-wise. I would argue the movie does that well, while some would disagree. What I didn't expect was to be completely wrapped up in the friendship of Art and Patrick, and the performances and chemistry that Mike Feist and Josh O'Connor display on screen. They balance unconditional love and brotherhood, confused longing and romance, and disdain and hatred for the other, and throughout each of these emotional changes, as the story hops back and forth in the timeline, it never feels like their past is ever lost from their psyche. Comparing the Churros scene to the last conversation they have in the sauna before the final match, it's the same energies, just different context. Art is trying to come off strong and secure when, in both scenes, Art wants what Patrick has. In the Churros scene, Art wants Tashi, but she is dating Patrick, so he starts to plant possible conflicts through conversation inside both of their heads, so he can strike when Patrick messes up. In the sauna scene, Art presents himself as above Patrick and his games of masculinity and domination, but what Art really wants is freedom from the life he fought for. Still wanting Tashi and loving his daughter, which is a whole aspect of the film that should have had a lot more focus but doesn't at all. Maybe that's to highlight how bad these people really are. But feeling trapped in the dream that Art wanted, and looking at Patrick with resentment, because it's almost like he stole his spot but can't handle the consequences that came with that. In both scenes, Patrick is the same and wants the same thing, which is Art's attention, and to stoke the flames to make Art more passionate. The movie isn't about tennis, it's about how tennis is metaphorical for life. Even in their nicknames, Fire and Ice, Patrick is fire and Art is ice. Patrick, as he gets older, is self-destructive and creates conflict for anything he becomes involved with. Art in the first 10 minutes of the film says nothing and is extremely calculated in everything he does to get Tashi away from Patrick, when knowing he can't win her heart by beating Patrick in tennis. Art doesn't believe in Tashi and Patrick's relationship, and he doesn't believe that Patrick really cares for her because of him being a womanizer. So for Art, this all feels justified. The interesting thing to me, though, is that in this love triangle, Tashi and Patrick know that Art is lurking and trying to find some way in, and they both accept and appreciate it because of the competitive nature they all possess. But for Patrick in particular, the more angry and motivated Art becomes, the more entertained and proud he is, because the ice begins to melt and the fire inside Art is revealed. Toxic dependency. I think both Art and Patrick never saw a reality without each other until Tashi entered the picture. The way I've always seen the triangle is Art wants Tashi, Patrick wants Art, and Tashi wants her life back. But because these two people were around and were important in her life when her injury took her future away from her, the proximity next to these two tennis athletes is what she seeks and yearns for, and depending on who has the competitive edge, changes where her heart and head lays. This movie isn't showcasing something good. These three are all incredibly toxic and cruel to each other, and yet they all love each other because of what they inspire in the other. Art never would have became the superstar athlete he is in the present without Tashi's tough love and coaching and Patrick's pushy competitive nature. Patrick, though being at the bottom financially and emotionally, without Tashi betraying Art and sleeping with him again, he never would have had experienced, I assume, the most fun he's ever had playing tennis with his best friend when finally facing Art again in the final match. And Tashi would be forgotten as the biggest what if in tennis sports history without Art and Patrick, and despite the constant yelling and backstabbing and cheating and plotting against one another. The last match, when Patrick tells Art the truth in a way only they would understand, all three of them are just as connected as they were in the hotel room when they were kissing each other. Maybe more so, because tennis is involved and that's the true through line between all of them. The story of Challengers isn't about who's right and who's wrong. Is Art the bad guy? Is Patrick the bad guy? Is Tashi manipulating them both the whole time? The answer to all three questions is yes. The question I'm curious about is, how do you break a connection that has stood the test of time even if it's destructive? Especially when a moment like the last match between Art and Patrick feels like for all three of them, all of their actions were worth it. Especially for Tashi, because without her presence in their life, that last match never happens, and Art never goes toe-to-toe like that with Patrick without Tashi's love being on the line. I think we've all been in situations where you are so dependent on this other person that you hide the wounds they give you from yourself. All three of these characters do that to continue this facade that it's all worth it. We'll probably never get a sequel or any furthering of their story, and to leave them at their highest is beautiful yet tragic, because once the high wears off is when the challenge truly begins. Thank you for watching.